Hello, and welcome to another edition of Guide to Youth with your host, Reha. I am Reha Zaqen, and I welcome you to my show. On today's list of topics to discuss is something a little bit unusual and something that may seem rather useless, or shall we say, not mainstream. And what I'd like to talk about today is head coverings. And why should you be concerned about how you present yourself in public, how you look, and why head coverings are important? For myself, I've always wanted a hat, but never looked good in them. And one time I was at a street fair, and I was trying one. I liked it, but the vendor told me that I was trying on the wrong hat. And that's because I'm not that tall and I didn't need such a big hat. So when he put a smaller hat on my size, on my head, it fit better and it made me look better. But still, I didn't feel comfortable wearing a hat. So I picked the scarves. On today's show, let's talk about head coverings and what they mean in our society, how they make us look, how they make us feel, and why are they such a big deal? I'm under a lot of scrutiny lately. It's the way we look when we cover our heads with a scarf, with a hat. It always seems to be controversial. Not too long ago, of Abercrombie and Fitch was fired because she was wearing a scarf to work and refused to take. And this is because Abercrombie and Fitch want their employees to wear any head coverings. They want their employees to walk around with beautiful shiny hair, unobstructed by any coverings. But this employee happened to be Arabic, and to her this was not an option. Their hat. I've always wanted a hat, but never looked good in one, and I've then decided to wear scarves. Why not? Scarves and big glasses. And that, of course, gets me through and kind of satisfies my desire for a head covering. But for many people, whether or not to cover their head is a big debate. For instance, there is a movement within the Christian church to promote head covering for women in the church. And this is because in the initial stages of Christianity, covering one's head was culturally acceptable because Christianity was born in the what is now the Arabic part of the world, and because covering one's head was a sign of submission. And in our society, covering your head with a scarf is not considered a sign of submission. So the modern Christian church views this as an unnecessary ritual, something that doesn't need to be part of our regular worship anymore. But there are other sects. For instance, at non-denominational mega churches, they believe none of this stuff applies anymore. But in some of the more traditional Christian churches, women never go in without some sort of a head covering, even if it is something symbolic, like a piece of lace. This is also the case in Jewish churches. The type of attire, the type of clothing we wear to church today does not lend itself well to a scarf, to a head covering, and so many women would rather skip it. But it's interesting to me that when certain women talk about head coverings, they usually say things like, a head covering makes me feel more beautiful than clothing my hair. For instance, if for the Rastafarians, the Jamaican religious sect, if their dreadlocks are considered head covering. And no, their dreadlocks are not a head covering, but the Rastas do cover their dreadlocks to keep them clean, and because hair is considered to be a spiritual and holy part of our bodies. And so when they cover their heads, they show respect for their spiritual self. And, because there are many interactions from day to day, there's some things that they would rather not come in contact with, especially not their hair, because their hair is considered to be holy. So this is why the Rasta cover their heads. An interesting point about this is that our hair contains essentially our history. There is so much information one can gather from cutting off a lock of hair and having it analyzed. Our hair is essentially a rolling history of our lives. So when people cut their hair off, they are essentially saying goodbye to that portion of their lives. This is if you ever consider shaving your head, because in essence you're saying, I'm done with that episode of my life and I want to start over again. In our society and in other societies around the globe, head coverings are a big deal. They cause a large amount of controversy. People, always debate to cover your head or not to cover your head. A hat can be fun, a scarf can be colorful, but there seems to be so much meaning associated with head coverings. It's an ancient ritual, and it's more primitive than modern. Yet some people choose to cover their heads and to continue to wear hats and scarves in our modern world. And so one happy event where head coverings are acceptable and encouraged, and where people go all out, is the Kentucky Derby. Wearing a hat to the Kentucky Derby is believed to bear good luck. So in this case, wearing a hat, covering your head, is associated with something positive. The long-established fashion was started by the women. However, over the last few years, many men have taken part in the tradition as well. Wearing a hat is much like getting into costume. You might be pleasantly surprised to see what type of character you become. From the fantastic to the sublime, there are no rules or limits how to adorn your head at the Kentucky Derby. In the clubhouse and paddock, women of grace and taste sport classy, fashionable styles. In the infield, the headwear has tendency to take on a zanier character. The bigger the hat, the better. The Kentucky Derby is a chance for every female to express her inner Southern belle. So, if you ever want to have a fun time with hats, the Kentucky Derby is it. So, when you wear a hat or a scarf, always remember, if your hat or scarf is having a pattern, then you need to keep your dress simple, and vice versa. This is Zaqen with another conversation on Guide to Youth. Please join me next time to talk about another interesting and relevant topic to teenagers between ages 13 to 19. Until then, be good, stay calm, and call mom.